views or opinions expressed on Ann Arbor Inclusive do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the City of Ann Arbor and the Commission on Disability Issues. For more information about the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues, please visit a2gov.org/disability resources.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive. I'm Zach Damon. We have a wonderful show for you today as Jim Baird, Chief of Police for the Ann Arbor Police Department, joins us in studio. And Chief, I'd just like to get things rolling if we may.
Absolutely.
So, as Chief of the Department, you're responsible for ensuring that the daily operations of the department are effective and efficient, and you were appointed to your current position as Chief in February of 2016. So, I'm curious, has the position been what you've expected?
A lot of it has.
Okay.
Certainly there's been some surprises,
Sure.
but I was the deputy chief prior to that, and Chief Cito tried to expose me to as much as he was able to,
There we go.
given the difference in our roles. And the chief's job, I think, has three main components. There's internally within the department, there's externally with the community. Those were both kind of what I expected.
Okay.
The third kind of piece of the pie that I didn't anticipate drawing so much time is the internal city government component of it.
Sure.
The discussing matters with council, with other city managers, that kind of thing. That was a
Sure.
bit of a surprise, but
Yeah.
more not the nature, but more the volume.
Sure.
I think more than anything else. But
Sure.
yeah, I'm happy I did it, but there's been some surprises.
Yeah. Well, and of course, law enforcement isn't necessarily something that's foreign to you. I mean, you hold a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University and, in criminal justice, and are also a graduate at the Eastern Michigan University School of Police Staff and Command. But I'm curious, what first got you interested in working in criminal justice and law enforcement?
Well, when I was growing up, all the little boys always wanted to be police officers, and I just never really outgrew it, I suppose. It's something that I've never wavered on. It's always been what I've wanted to do. That's a little bit unusual, I think,
Sure.
in this day and age. You know, we find that I have teenage children now, and their focus is all over the place on things they might want to try.
Sure.
I was a little different than that. I've always kind of been focused on that. It hasn't really been incident-driven, not through exposure. It's just something that I've always wanted to do and just kind of followed through with it.
I mean, I think that's great because you're, as a lot of the police officers say, right, protect and serve the community.
Mm-hmm.
And, do you still find it rewarding every day when you get up?
I do. I find that the further I get from actually being a police officer, the harder it is to find those nuggets.
I see. Okay.
The job of a police officer is incredibly complex, and the job that the line officers do out there every day, I admire the heck out of them for it. Especially in this day and age with all of the challenges that law enforcement's reception in the community tends to be a little bit on a pendulum, and I think we're definitely at one side of that right now.
Yep.
And they still go out there every day and do what they need to do and still provide that very high level of service.
You bring up a great point about perception. What are some of the misconceptions of police officers?
Oh, I think you would need a longer show to get into those.
Sure,
But
just a couple.
I think the biggest one is just that police officers, I mean, they're human, just like everybody else. They make mistakes. They have good days. They have bad days. They get into this line of work just like anybody gets into any line of work for a variety of reasons. The biggest, I think, though, is that police work is the sheer number of tasks that we ask an officer to be able to perform and to perform well is enormous. And the skill sets that are needed for one versus another are sometimes even contradictory. So, a police officer has to be a social worker. They have to be good in a physical confrontation.
Right.
Those skill sets tend to be you don't tend to see those in the same person. So to understand, I really wish most people would understand that police officers are doing so many different things, and some of them they're going to be more naturally good at, just like all of us. And some of them are going to involve them stretching beyond their comfort zone a little, and so that's just true with the police as well.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective because there's so many different skills. So would you say that that this field, being in law enforcement and criminal justice, is it more of a calling?
I do, yes, I would absolutely say that. If you don't, if you don't feel like you're really called to this line of work, I just don't think you'll have the longevity in it. It can wear people out. You tend to, in police work, unfortunately, we tend to encounter people on the worst day of their lives often. And so if you can't go into the job knowing that that's the case,
Right.
and being prepared for that, and we often are in a position where we are, it's often conflict driven.
Sure. Right.
So where there's a winner and a loser
Yeah.
oftentimes,
Yeah.
And so we very rarely, if a firefighter shows up on the scene, they're usually just there to make things better for everybody.
Right.
With the police, sometimes it makes it better for one half, but not the other. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, very great points, but also, again, good perspective to have. And getting back to your journey, because I think it's very fascinating, you've held many positions in your time in law enforcement and since joining the Ann Arbor Police Department. I'm just going to touch on a few.
Sure.
But you have been with the Ann Arbor Police Department since 1993 when you were hired on as a patrol officer, and then worked your way up. And so you were promoted to sergeant in 1999, lieutenant in 2012, and then deputy chief, as you said, May of 2013, and have held numerous positions, including the SWAT team. And so I'm interested, of all of the positions that I just listed, which position do you feel you got the most out of to sort of prepare you for your current position as chief?
I would say just probably due to proximity. The deputy chief role, although I was in it a duration, was relatively short amount of time. But it was, I think that's the one that if I had to pick one out that single-handedly probably did. But I think what truly prepared me to do this job is the totality of everything. Being able to see the department from so many different perspectives and so many different levels,
Sure.
Different roles in engaging the community, different roles as a police officer, I think is the, outside of the deputy chief role, if I had to pick one more, it would be as an officer, because
Really?
you truly get to understand the people that you're there to serve. That's where you have the most exposure to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of the community, in your mind, what separates the Ann Arbor Police Department from other departments around the state?
I think there's some things that we do better than other agencies, and I think there's some areas where we could probably make improvements.
Sure.
We're in the midst of an assessment going on right now in the police department. This is driven largely from the incident that occurred, a lethal force incident that the police had a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
And so as a result of the look into that, council has asked for an outside group to look at the police department,
Sure.
kind of help us to kind of a little checkup, internal checkup,
Right.
to see how we're doing. And so we're in the midst of that right now.
Okay.
I think we'll have a little bit more direction and maybe some recommendations that come out of that. But all in all, I think that the police department in Ann Arbor, the thing that makes us successful in doing what we do is the people that we hire. It's the officers. We're very, very picky about who we bring on.
Is that right?
Yes, it's a very exhaustive selection process. We are, we want the best because of what we talked about before.
Yeah.
They're tasked with doing so many different things, and I had a academy that I spoke to recently, and they
Sure.
said, "What do you look for?" And everything. We look for everything. You have to have. We have officers that have to be able to, they have to be capable of an incredible amount of compassion, and sometimes they have to be capable of violence on the same call.
Wow.
And that's,
Yeah.
it's the bar for somebody to reach to be able to act on both ends of the spectrum
Yeah.
effectively is pretty hard to reach.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be, too, an incredible amount of emotion and an incredible amount of mental and emotional stamina that each officer needs to have.
Yes.
And that is just amazing.
Yeah.
Because, as an outsider, you don't necessarily see that. We see you in the uniform. We know
Right.
what your duties are,
Right.
right? To protect and serve the community, to uphold the laws, to go about bringing justice in criminal cases. But again, getting that perspective is just eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's in addition to all of the same stresses, because they're humans, they have families, they
Right.
have they have their kids' soccer games they're going to,
Sure.
or whatever else is going on in their lives. That stuff doesn't end.
Mm.
But now, in addition to the normal everyday stresses that an officer would experience in their personal life,
Sure.
they're also the ones that are kind of dispatched when the stressors in other people's lives have exceeded their capacity to handle it on their own.
Got it.
So that's it can have some compounding effects. You're right.
Sure. Well, and you brought up an interesting point about, community and being involved with the Ann Arbor community, and that's really what separates the department. And so on that point, the Ann Arbor Police Department Road Patrol is committed to community-oriented policing, as you guys like to say. And that philosophy strives for a high level of community engagement. On community engagement within the past year, your department worked closely with the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues in developing disability resource cards to hand out to officers so that they can hand it out to those in the community that could use those resources. So could you talk a little bit about what those are?
Certainly. It's basically a business card, and it has on it resources that are available in the community for those that are living with a disability. It is in Braille as well for those that are visually impaired, and so it's just a way for the officers, because the police tend to be a one-stop shop. Okay. So if there's a fire, yes, the fire department goes, but actually the police will end up going. If there's a medical problem, the police end up going. If there's something nobody knows what to do with, the police end up going.
Okay.
If, somebody calls 911, we're the first ones to get sent.
Right.
So we often will have contact with people that could benefit from this card.
Sure.
The interesting thing, though, that's occurred is that most of the officers I've talked to that have tried to give the resource to people have actually said, yeah, we're already aware of that. So I think the Ann Arbor community as a whole, does a really good job of kind of getting the message out there. And so probably due to the commission's work largely, but they will, a lot of people are already aware of the resource. And so the people that are truly finding the information out for the first time are usually new to town.
Wow. And I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? And an informed community about what's going on. And again, I think that's really wonderful too, that the department was motivated to team up with the commission to develop those. And sort of, was it something that you just got together and you said, this could be very helpful? How did that go about? Did you approach the commission?
No, actually it was the commission that approached us.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Wow.
The chair, is Sally, she approached us along with representatives from the Center for Independent Living. And we decided that this was one of the things that we could offer.
Sure.
And in addition to that, we also tried to help, the commission helped us to focus our training efforts a little bit better.
Wow.
And so we've had people with service dogs train the officers. We have had, in law enforcement, especially with the national conversation going around with police use of force, the groups that a lot of people have a higher level of anxiety about police interactions with are the hearing impaired and those that are on the autism spectrum. And so we've tried to increase our training in those areas, something that's already occurred on a regular basis. However, we try and, they tend to be somewhat cyclical, so we'll hit it this year and then we'll hit something else next year and then we come back to it in a couple years. So those types of things we've worked with the commission and the CIL on.
I mean, and I think that it's just amazing that you guys have been able to develop that, and of course it's been very successful.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. So the Ann Arbor Police Department has also expanded its social media connection with the community by launching the department's Twitter account. And the Ann Arbor Police Department also uses other forms of social media to connect with residents and citizens of Ann Arbor. In your opinion, why is social media an important tool within law enforcement and criminal justice?
Well, there's several reasons, but you asked earlier what we do well, and that was one of the areas we were lacking in. That was where we were a little bit behind some of our colleague agencies. And so we're kind of making up a little ground there. We kicked off initially with Facebook, a Facebook component, and then we also did Nextdoor at the same time, which is more focused on a particular neighborhood and things that might happen there in communication. But the biggest thing that we see in police work is the same thing that is, I think, true all across the country and the world right now.
Okay.
Is that the demand for instant access to information is through the roof.
Yes.
And people just truly don't understand, why didn't I know this?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Sure.
And so in a way to, in an effort to try and make sure that we are engaged with the community in every way we can, we have to kind of go to where the community is.
Sure.
And that is the driving way that communication occurs these days, is through social media. So
Yeah.
we've tried to kind of up our game in those areas.
Sure. So have you noticed a positive impact then from when you've started the Facebook, started the Twitter, things like that? Have you been able to crack cases? If
We
you will,
actually,
with
oh
social
yes,
media?
yes, we actually have. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put out wanted posters.
Okay.
That way,
Wow.
when we had the big windstorm that came through
Yeah, sure.
about a month ago,
Yeah.
we had power lines that were down, sections of the city that were just shut down because we couldn't have people traveling by car, and so
Okay.
that was a good way for us to connect with people and let them know kind of ongoing, this is what's going on, avoid this area,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
No, I think again, that's very innovative, and I'm glad that it's effective because, again, like you said, with the digital age, I mean, more and more things are evolving, more and more things are changing, so it's great that, the Ann Arbor Police Department is keeping up with that.
Yeah.
Can you share, because you've had a long career in law enforcement and criminal justice, but can you share with us a good story, a great memory that you have, something that really sticks out to you in your accomplishments or your memories with colleagues?
Yeah, it doesn't really involve me directly, but I think
Okay.
it's a good example of kind of the community and the police department working together, and how sometimes that can bring out the best in people.
Sure.
So recently we had one of our officers, Officer Ford, who was actually training one of our brand new officers. He's going in front of, he's driving in front of Huron High School, and there's a vehicle broken down on the
wow.
side of the road. Not unusual.
Yeah.
Officers encounter that all the time.
Sure.
And so they pull up there and they realize that the car has a flat tire. It's the vehicle is a very old car, not in good condition, and it's an adult woman who's taking her elderly father to the VA hospital. He's a vet, and he is on his way up there for an appointment. He's also has issues with dementia and Alzheimer's that he's being treated for.
Sure.
And so the officers initially get there, and they're like, well, she explains what the situation is, where she's on her way to. He says, well, let's get your dad up to the hospital, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with your car. So
Sure.
they load Dad up into the squad car, take him up to the hospital, drop him off with her, and then they come back to deal with the car. They were going to initially, because the woman that was there, she was financially struggling.
Oh,
She's
no.
on a very fixed income,
Right.
trying to take care of herself and her father, who has significant needs as well.
Sure.
And so they didn't want to call a tow truck that's going to, so the officers decided, well, let's change the tire for her.
Okay.
So they go to do that, and the spare is flat as well.
Are you kidding?
And so the
Jeez.
officer, he just said, look, I'm just going to buy this woman new tires for her car. And
All
so,
4 tires?
Yeah, he said, I'm just going to buy her new tires for her car.
Wow.
And so he calls the wrecker driver, and the wrecker comes out, hooks up the car. The officer explains the situation. And the wrecker driver says, oh, don't worry about that. We won't charge you. We'll just get the car up to the tire place for you.
Wow.
And so they're getting ready to do that.
Sure.
A woman, because it's right outside of Huron High School, a woman from the high school sees this and walks out and just kind of inquires what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The officer explains the situation, says what he's going to do, and the woman disappears for a little while. When she comes back, she's
Yeah.
got an envelope with some money in it.
Wow.
And says, please put this towards the tires as well. So they get the car up to the tire place,
Sure.
and the manager of the tire store, they explain, hey, I'm not looking to break the bank here,
Right.
but if you could put new tires on this woman's car, I'd appreciate it. Explains her husband's, or her father was a vet.
Yeah.
The woman behind the counter is a manager, and she's also a vet. She says, you know what, this is on us. And
No,
so,
you're kidding.
so yeah, it was a really neat example of people who are not having the best day,
Yeah.
and the community and the police department. In the end, the officer came to me because he was looking for a way to recognize these other people. He didn't even really seem to understand his role in the whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But what an amazing story.
Yeah,
And
I thought so too.
of community, of everybody working together, and again, of officers protecting and serving
Yes.
the community.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Man, and, you know, you bring up a good point too, because to me, this is also important, right? Because as you know, officers are always needed. Services of the community are always needed. So for an aspiring young person who's watching this, you know, whether it's a man or a woman, and they have a dream of becoming a police officer or are interested in it, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say it's not a decision to take lightly. The demands of the role can take a toll on somebody over time, especially over the duration of a career.
Okay.
But in order to be successful in that job, you have to understand it. So I would encourage them when they're old enough to go on ride-alongs.
Okay.
I would encourage them to do a lot of research to see if this is something they truly want to do. They really have to come into it with a servant mentality.
Okay.
Or otherwise they won't be successful.
Okay.
And in addition to that, the biggest thing that we see is people that are knocked out of our process because of background issues.
Oh, really?
Things that have happened in the past.
Sure.
When I was younger, and everybody does it, but when I was younger and I would make a mistake, there wasn't somebody recording it with a cell phone and posting it for the world to see.
Right.
That's not necessarily the case anymore. And so any mistake that a young person might make today, there's pretty good chance that that's documented somehow. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, is just you got to be smart to do this job. So keep up with your grades, keep up with your schoolwork, do all your research, make sure you understand the job, and then try and keep your nose clean to keep the option available.
Yep. No, that's wonderful. That's amazing. And, you know, I hope that all those watching can really stick by those words, and if they want to be able to join the police force one day, know that they can do it.
Yeah, that would be great. We're going to have 49% of our staff eligible to retire in the next 5 years.
What, is that right?
Yeah.
My goodness.
It's going to be significant. Over 50 people can leave.
Wow, my goodness. Do you guys ever have, you know, like children's days or, you know, things that families can do with the Ann Arbor Police Department?
Yes, we actually have an open house. I believe it's scheduled for the third week in June.
Oh,
I'd have to
great.
confirm that, but
Sure.
I believe it's the third Saturday in June.
Okay.
And we do that in conjunction with the fire department.
Oh,
so
great.
a lot of the officers and firefighters and the ones that are responsible for a special position, like they usually cut up a car. The firefighters will usually cut a car open to show how they would do that at a crash scene. I think this year we're going to have some of the officers from the SWAT team rappelling off of City Hall, stuff like that.
That'll be really neat.
So,
wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so make sure, folks, that you can get out to that event. You said it's in June, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. That's awesome. And lastly, we touched on this a little bit before the show, but I thought it was a very fun and interesting point. So, Super Troopers, one of my favorite films that came out, I think it was in the early 90s, but they're coming out with the Super Troopers 2 this year. So will you or anybody from the department be seeing that?
Well, I think that there will be attended by some, yes, absolutely. I imagine that my teenage son's going to want me to go to that one with him, but yes, yes.
Well, an interesting fact, you actually grew up with one of the actors in that film, or went to high school with him.
Went to high school with John Heffron, yes.
That is amazing.
Yes,
Went
yes.
to high
He's a
school.
South Lyon High School graduate.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow. Well, the time is meow if you want to go see Super Troopers 2. I just thought I'd plug that. Well, Chief Baird, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and taking the time to sit down with me, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. And I'd like to thank again Chief Baird of the Ann Arbor Police Department for being on the show, and hope that you enjoyed the program. Be sure to tune into Ann Arbor Inclusive next month, and as always, stay awesome, Ann Arbor.